how has been the last 100 days for yourself and also for BMR Legal. If the firm has adapted certain strategic approach as a response towards this pandemic, and how have you also been personally responding to this situation?
I'd like to mention two, three things clearly. This is an unprecedented event that leave alone the legal profession, but even the world was not prepared for. And hence, there is nothing that could have been planned to deal with the situation that we are currently dealing with. But bulk of that planning and is either a work in progress, or some people have been able to figure out more than the others. I'll come to your question on the strategic approach because that's kind of a work in progress. But let me just give you a little bit brief on what the impact has been and how we in BMR Legal have dealt with this. I leave it to you and your judgment as to the efficacy and effectiveness of it. But I'd like to share some of my experiences with you. But before I do that, I think you need to give a context to this. And the context to this is that every law firm has a mix of work, and the mix of work will eventually determine as to how do you deal with the situation from a practice standpoint in the COVID period. So let me give you two, three elements of the mix of work. Some law firms have a balance of advisory and disputes work. Some law firms are focused largely on advisory, and some law firms are focused on only disputes. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that the mix of work in a law firm also depends on what are your focus areas, because those focus areas really determine your interaction with the external community, and whether which parts of those interaction are really necessitated because of the human interaction. For example, you and I are having this conversation. Ideally, if we were not in the COVID world, you would have been in my chamber, and or we would have met somewhere at Taj, or and done this conversation. So for us, this conversation is not getting impacted because we've been able to both figure out a very convenient way to do it. You've been able to achieve your objective. As a matter of fact, both of us have saved time of travel and cost as well. So you need to also give a context to the law firms that have huge transaction work, huge intellectual property work, huge civil commercial work versus work that we do in our area. Now, our firm is a boutique in the sense that, unlike full service law firms, we do tax and we do things that are periphery to tax. For example, if there is a bilateral investment treaty arbitration in which there is a tax angle, we get involved. If there is a huge M&A transaction and we have to give inputs from a tax side, we get involved. So yes, transaction work is very important for us. Investment treaty related arbitration work are very important to us, particularly the one that have a tax angle. But not everything that concerns full service law firms are important to us. Now, how have we dealt with this situation? Clearly, when I started off, I mentioned that we have a good balance of advisory and disputes work. Now, clearly, as we entered the pandemic, we realized that for the first 2 months, there was no court work because the e-courts started functioning only towards the early to the mid part of June. And what happened really, the mix of our work shifted from court to advisory. Uh, have we been busy? Yes, we have been extremely busy, barring the first couple of weeks where it took us time to be able to figure out how do we really go about with our lives. We found our feet very fast because we started accepting more and more advisory engagements. We started having a proactive dialogue with the client. We shifted some of our resources to doing research work. We released two research reports just last month. One is by with ASSOCHAM and one is with Vidhi Legal Center on digital tax, which is a very, very debatable topic in the tax profession. And I'm happy to send you a copy of both the research report. The e-court has started. Now, in the e-courts, as you know, the courts are hearing important matters such as bail and such as indisposition matters. Now, that do not concern us because we are an only tax firm. So, on tax matters, relatively simpler matters, covered matters, stay matters that are getting heard, and we are dealing with that. What's the strategic approach? Well, nothing in particular. I'd like to see advisory work grow. As far as the arbitration work is concerned, the expert witness work that we do clearly is growing. The expert witness that we do in a UK arbitral proceedings are functioning far more effectively than an arbitration where is happening in Delhi. So I guess the strategic approach will depend on each law firm. All of our associates and all of our interns have laptops. We are able to work far more effectively. We have the requisite securities in place. We do not allow our people use of technologies that could potentially be a security threat. So if you ask me, the work from home has worked out very well for us. We've been mindful of our small team, 15 lawyers and five of counsels in so far as their well-being is concerned. So far as the families are concerned, we had one of our associates who got tested positive in these times. So it required a whole lot of effort to be able to help build the confidence back because younger people tend to get very disenchanted and demotivated. So I guess we've been able to figure out in the last 100 days as to what should be the approach in the new world as we enter. I don't know if that's what you were looking out for, but that's really a sum and substance of what I wanted to talk about.
So, just rewinding it, you I think around three decades of practice you've had in law. So, if you can tell us maybe a little bit about how your initial years, how your formative years as a lawyer started out, right after you finished studying LLB, and you were just carving your path as an independent practitioner at that point. Can you tell us a little bit about those years?
Well, Anish, I don't know if you seen my resume. Yes, you're right. I have over 3 decades of experience in professional services, but not all of it is as a lawyer. I was a qualified lawyer, but my first 20 years, or rather 23 years, I must say, I practiced as a chartered accountant. And it's only in the last 10 years that I'm practicing as a lawyer. The only common thread in my last 33 years is that I have not ventured out of the tax core competencies. So it really doesn't impact me. My being a lawyer in the last 10 years has merely helped me achieve two things. Number one, it's given me the ability to appear in the courts, which I couldn't as a chartered accountant. And two, it has given me the requisite gravitas to think beyond the tax law, which is the contract and the exchange control and the evidence and the civil procedure code. Well, how I started off like any other professionally qualified person starts. I was working in large firms for the first 18 years. Those were the times when the common buzz was the right person at the right time and at the right place. So I became an Anderson Worldwide partner when I was just 31 years old. You can call me a lucky person. So I led a fairly senior management level career at a very, very early stage of my life. And I consider myself lucky. And you know, when you get into a senior management leadership level at the age of in your 30s, you tend to get bored in the sense, what do you do next? And that's why I turned an entrepreneur at the age of 40, and I set up my own firm along with the other co-founders, which was called BMR Advisors. That firm transitioned into the Big Four in 2017, and I came back into my boutique model. So life has been a good seesaw of nice experiments, more pleasant, uh, and more of learnings than any regrets, I would say. And I couldn't have asked for more. And that's why I use the word twice that I'm a very lucky person.
So when you specifically spoke about like you started entering the senior management level at a very early, like 31 is a very early stage to reach that level of success. Not so many of us are able to achieve that. So can you tell us maybe the kind of habits and practices that you had at that point of time in as a lawyer? Like, were you constantly reading materials? Were you constantly trying to network amongst people? How are you developing your roadmap around that time?
Well, good question, Anisha. Two things. I became partner at the age of 31, and then I got onto the management responsibility at the age of 35, the leadership responsibility. Now, what happens in a professional services firm, whether it's a law firm or an accounting firm, is that when you are a high performer, you also become a candidate for a leadership position. Now, when you take on leadership position, particularly if it's a non-client role, you have to be mindful how much are you balancing between your client and your non-client responsibility. Because if you want to be serving clients and if you want to be at the cutting edge, then you cannot give up client work. I know lots of my colleagues in the legal profession who have become management partners, who do not do client work. Well, I think that that is a real challenge because as professional lawyers, we are in demand because the clients want to, you know, bank on and leverage on our technical knowledge. As you become more and more senior, the client wants to leverage on your wisdom because our profession is such that the older you get, the better you get. It's the same old wine story that we have. And hence, from my standpoint, it is critical having achieved a leadership position at a very early stage of my career was to be able to keep up to speed with the technical knowledge, with the ability to advise clients, with the ability to get into situations which are very complex and clients really see you adding value to that. To your point on networking, I think I was again very fortunate and lucky with the kind of supervisors that I had who encouraged me to embrace soft skills and at a very early age, whether those are by way of public speaking skills or writing skills or ability to indulge in deep research or networking opportunities, which is, for a lack of better terms, people call it business development. Now, there are ways and means to be able to achieve growth in your business. I come from an old school of thought, and I don't think that lawyers and professionals should solicit work, but we know the reality at the ground level is different. Everyone is soliciting work, and everyone calls this business development or marketing. My idea of a professional lawyer is that you should be so good that the client should be at your doorstep. You should be so good that the client should seek out for you, and then you ask for your price from the client. Now, in order for you to be able to do that, you have to be outstanding in technical knowledge, in analysis, in giving business solutions, in bringing real cutting edge approach to clients' problems. So I would say a combination of developing non-technical skills in the area of public speaking, high research, and ability to network with the right-minded people is, in my view, what stood out for me in my career.
Thank you so much. I think that was a great answer. Um, can you also tell us a little bit about your present role as the chairman of the Indian Physical Association?
International Fiscal Association is one of the largest international tax bodies outside of the United Nations. It is a non-partisan body known for its deep research in the area of international tax law, international customary law, such as the bilateral double tax treaties, and it is often sought for by way of advice from the OECD, from the United Nations, from the IMF, and the world's leading bodies, including many nations. This body, though born in Netherlands, has a very significant chapter in India. This chapter brings together a group of professionals, academicians, governments, research bodies together to debate on pertinent issues of international tax treaty law. As you know, India has been at the forefront of many of these issues, whether that's got to do with debates at the OECD platform, or that's got to do with how the Indian tax policy and the Indian judiciary is interpreting the Indian law. So I'm extremely proud and privileged to be the chair of IFA in India. I also had the privilege to be on the permanent scientific committee of the IFA's global body between the year 2010 and 2016. It was a 6 year term. This 6 year term is extremely prestigious because the permanent scientific body of IFA globally is really the think tank. That's the body that looks into the futuristic projects on tax research. That's the body that organizes the annual IFA congresses, which is in its 77th year right now as we speak. And that's a body which has representatives not from all the countries but select countries. India has had representation in that bodies, and I was very fortunate because my previous, members of the committee were people like Mr. O.P. Vesh, Mr. Soli Dastu, Mr. Poras Kaka, all three senior advocates, and really I followed the third individual as representing India on this body between 2010 and 2016. And now, of course, it's a double privilege for me to be able to lead the IFA India chapter.
So so of course BMR legal has very niche areas of practice, and out of which specifically we wanted to discuss a little bit about the customs and trade practice. If you can tell us a little bit about typically the kind of the matters that you are consulting in there, the areas of law that you have to research upon. So can you tell us a little bit about that area of practice?
Yeah, interesting question. The customs and trade practice often gets confused with indirect taxes because the administrative body that looks after the uh, customs law is the Central Board of GST and Customs. However, I consider indirect taxes, which is GST and which used to be the state VAT and the central excise before the GST law came in, as very different than the customs and the trade practice. The customs and the trade practice, in my view, envisages a responsibility that goes far beyond tax. For example, from a policy standpoint, the customs tariffs are very often used as trade barriers by various nations. This is where we get into issues like the WTO, which is different than the WCO. The World Tax Organization is different than the World Customs Organization. You get into areas such as bilateral trade agreements. So the international trade and customs practice, in my view, is distinct from other forms of indirect taxes. Now, let me come to the question, what do we really do in our customs and trade practice? We do advisory work in terms of advising clients on where is India heading towards its policy with respect to non-tariff barriers. This is very relevant, particularly in today's environment when India is thinking of embargoes on customs importation in the country as a result of backlash with China. Now, whether that comes in by way of high customs tariff or that comes in by way of banning the imports altogether, it's an integral part of the advisory practice. The second is the uh, international trade agreements. You would have seen the statement today issued by Mr. Piyush Goyal, where he has talked about a limited trade agreement with United States. Uh, we have a comprehensive trade and economic agreement with Singapore. We have, as a nation, let all the trade agreements with various nations expire. So, all of these are going to evolve by way of what is going to be India's approach towards trade policy. So, that's the trade part of it. What do we specifically do? One, we give advice on these aspects to our clients. On customs specifically, our practice entails advisory, including representations on various aspects. Those representations could be by way of proceedings before the special valuation bench of the custom authorities, which questions the valuation of the imports that the clients do, particularly from related parties. And second would be helping clients handle investigations on customs authorities. So the investigations from the customs authorities could be before either the special valuation bench or before the DRI, Directorate of Revenue Intelligence. These investigations are extremely sensitive. So we help our clients address these investigative aspects within the customs and trade law. So if you see, in the entire conversation, I did not discuss GST because I am segregating GST as a arm of tax from the customs and the trade practice. So it's been an extremely enriching experience for us to help clients in our trade and customs practice.